the book that's coming out, The Voice of Sheila Chandra, is actually 3 long poems, and the central poem is the title poem. It's comprised of 40 sonnet stanzas. It might be a 40 sonnet sequence, or it might be one long poem built out of stanzas that are the length of sonnets. I can't really decide. I couldn't tell you. But maybe I will read, how about this idea? I will read 3 of those sonnets.
Wonderful.
That will give like the tiniest bit of a flavor of what this book is about. How about that?
That sounds fantastic. Yes.
Okay.
Wonderful.
I don't want to take up too much time because I want you to read, and I want to hear about, and I want to talk to you about your book. So here are 3 little sonnets from this book. None of them have titles. What represses, unhomes in the sound, who has made me? What is made me? Is a voice just muscles and shape, and breath to phrase a song? Boats assemble at the mouth of the harbor, mouth in earth. You who wrote an ode to silence never wrote of what is silenced. I did seek all resounding caves. Let the voice be lit, all the lanterns in the new world. We need the language of stone, from string to string. Quiver in the opening, the garden, so beautiful. Lucifer, dark, sun of morning. No Eden, but innocence. No expulsion, but after. So these are sonnets, of course, that have, rather than one single turn in them, as is typical for a classical sonnet, multiple turns within them. You may also hear that there are not only line breaks, but enjambments across a line break and midline caesuras, or breaks of phrase, that somewhat disrupt the expectation of a line in a sonnet. No more will I listen to other than a single note, moaned, not known. I do not hear, think again what place presents itself, own, moan, well, I hear body as battery of the one moment when it is time to open your mouth, plug in. I will allow what I invented to find its color, make a shape which neither water nor sky do. How do you now in this contained shape go through your life, not like a constellation, not guessed at, intuited, or divined, no name. So how do you discern a shape for what is often called God?
Nice.
And this last one that I'll read is, it refers to Vanta Black, which is an actual color that was created. So it's a real thing, you can Google it. Vanta Black was made for missiles or planes for defense purposes. So dark, no eye could see it. Some voices are like that, no one could hear them. It is not good to be lost. To be lost is more than metaphor for spiritual condition. I sit at the terrace overlooking the green sea. Perhaps it is failure that ought to be sought, the voice that fails, falls silent, Sheila's, or the bodies, the blue failed me, the sun fails every evening, I, we, you have all failed too. Everyone who strove all these long years for peace failed.
Those are beautiful, man.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So that's what I'm up to these days.
You're a little ambitious, you know.
I'm a little ambitious. Well, you know what though? These sonnets are broken into by silence. They are interrupted. They are fractured in a sense. I feel, as I was reading your book, also in a sense haunted
Yeah.
haunted by the other, haunted by presences than the other, as the poems in your book are haunted not only by like the metaphorical ghost, but the actual historical ghost.
Yeah.
And they're also haunted by the presence, within them, the presence that's not named. I think they are poems of a kind of reticence, in a sense,
Yeah.
that don't always speak what's at the emotional truth of what's at the heart of them. And there is an interesting counterpoint between, in any poem, the subject of the poem, that
Right.
what Hugo called, the triggering subject, and then the actual subject. And so in yours, it's almost like, I feel like you progress to a point in the poem where you progress past the original subject, the triggering subject, where the triggering subject is gone, and then you get to the actual subject, and then you keep going, and then the actual subject disappears too, and you actually have this like past trace element almost, which I think is a really fine, it's a really fine action actually, and very accomplished in this book. So I'm using that as a segue, but I am looking forward to hearing you read. And I'm gonna exit stage right for a second to close the door, and I'll be right back.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. It's a good thing in Zoom, no one can see you blush. Those are really, really kind of. Well, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Kazim, for being here too. I'm going to get to it here and read a couple poems, and I'm going to start by getting in touch with the ghosts. I guess we're going to start with it's a poem called Meteorology Index, and this poem is based on. I was traveling through Eastern Europe, and I was seeing all these kind of hazmat symbols places. And and in Eastern Europe, the hazmat symbols, they aren't these kind of cartoonish things that they have here. They're very vivid and visceral looking skulls and lightning bolts and dead fish. It's some pretty freaky stuff. So I thought I'd string together a couple of descriptions of those, and this is what happened. Meteorology Index. Between absinthe and Corinthians, between linoleum and Lamanites, ghosts. What else? Ghosts and more ghosts. Ghosts who haunt the salt shaker and sugar bowl, who howl like pesos as you pass. Ghosts who speak of skulls in careful English, who smoke cigarettes indoors, whose heads are titled by a toxic lack of locks. Ghosts who write love letters to ghosts, who linger light as book-pressed butterflies upon the lips of the living, who taste of lie and lollipop alike, who always stand behind you like a lightning crippled tree. Nebraskan vibes. Not once in a river yet, a rapid run of reckless mouths gnash their way through the alphabet's many motorways. The crowd, faces like hot dominoes and doldrums, their destiny too dense to parse, too dear to describe, is in denial. Give them this day before they chew even the scenery, before they crush the shunts that keep the sky in its place and squash the sarsaparilla tufts of cloud that congeal at the eye's very edges. Give them the blood, the bread, the ghost, the salty tines of Satan's seasick fork. It's hot. Open a window or something. I feel the heat of a holy oven upon my household. To care is to sometimes kill, as we have sometimes been told. To care is to carve the image of our caretaker into this idle tree and border crossing. Under how many watts will this age be broiled? Douse me in better water for brisker belief. Do this in remembrance of our impractical head and heads, our illiterate heart and hearts. So this is the first poem in the collection here, The Bell System, and it references Mary Jane and Pat, who were the first names of the women who supplied the voices for the Bell System's automated telephone messaging service. So back in the old days, before we had the cell phones and everything else, I don't know why I'm saying the cell phones, they're just cell phones. You would call a number and it would be disconnected, and you'd hear a little dial tone, and then this very friendly, cheerful voice would tell you in the plainest terms possible that the person you were looking for is gone, and you had no way to track them down. So Mary Jane and Pat operate in some ways like spirit guides or a Greek chorus in this book. The bell system. Good night, Mary, Jane, Pat. Sleep tight, you sweet operators of America. Your voices strung like laundry across this nation, drowsy with a full century's worth of light. There's nothing you can't tell me that I haven't already heard, gift wrapped in your general American grace. But still I wonder in what chamber of a horse's ant-eaten skull I'll recover my youth. Our human garden grows rich in these green suburbs, and what I feel is not so much loss as a lessening, as if the self was nothing more than a late model sedan crossing the city limit in search of a better resale value. It's funny, this franchise of molecules that fizzes up in each of us, like motels, viral along the interstate, some full while others flicker and die. When will the stars rain down like cheap plaster? When will language be little more than a dandruff shaken from our heads? Ladies, you tell me the number I've been calling has been disconnected, but where did the person it belonged to go? Alone on the line, I find only a prairie alive with funneled wind, a nation heavy with wheat and light, its chorus of dim voices locked in a kind of pharmaceutical sleep. I find a system unchanged, charged with electrical pulses that send the receiver scurrying in their cradle. The longhand breath of ghosts rising through switchboards to ask, who's there? Well, tell me, who is there? Who goes? Ladies, please wake up. I want to try again. We'll break for some scotch. Thank you.
I'm drinking water.
Why are you drinking water? I thought this was a poetry reading.
No, I don't know.
I thought you were concealing your adult beverage in a mug, which I felt I should have done as well. I mean, you know, one of the problems, of course, with the whole Zoom revolution is that it's only 4 p.m. in California, so I'm getting a very early start on my day here.
I know what you shouldn't have said though, but we can't hide because of the sunlight.
That's true. That's a good.
It's true. It is 7:20 somewhere.
That's there's a country song just like that. Oh man, well, cheers to you at home and you in Normal Heights and wherever you might be out there in Zoom land. We hope you're enjoying yourselves tonight. Next poem's called Body of New Jersey, not 1980. I spent 6 months, I like Kazim, moved around a lot as a kid, and I had the distinct pleasure of spending 6 months in New Jersey, which was probably about 5.5 months too much, you know, for a ninth grader who was only about 5 feet tall and weighed about 90 pounds. So I would like to thank those, my former colleagues at the Kinnelon High School who were sometimes maybe not the gentlest of people with my small frame, but look at me now, man, everything's great. So anyhow, this is called Body of New Jersey, 1980. The body of New Jersey is sleepy. The sky of New Jersey is imitation crocodile. The people of New Jersey hold sunburn by its delicate hand and say grace in the consequent light of their television sets. In the morning, sometimes a sparrow arrives at a window to ask for a dram of salt. Politeness is absurd, but bad manners won't do come tea time. Right then, the people of New Jersey listen to the body of New Jersey underneath the sky of New Jersey. No longer can they ignore the gin mills smoldering like an East European drama. No longer can they rake leaves. They weep openly in their backyards beneath their smokestacks and overpasses, all sweetly candid under the fast sorrow of the tax collector's case. The air is empty, as it always is. The air that has no voice, though we bully it with flight and forest fires. At the television supper table, we are still at odds with the sparrow who sings. I'm gonna skip ahead to almost the very end of the book here. This poem's called National Anthem, and many of the fragments or pieces were in some ways borrowed, in some ways inspired by antique board games. And it's interesting to think about too, if you think about Monopoly. I learned this recently, that the Monopoly, the game itself, was actually stolen The idea itself is stolen. A woman created it, and then this traveling salesman found the idea, and then he claimed it as his own. So even in the game of Monopoly, we have this great exercise in early American capitalism.
Well, she created it as a teaching tool on the evils of capitalism.
That's right, right?
It was meant to show, because you can't really win. Once in Monopoly, once you start losing,
Yeah.
you cannot win again. You can't. We
Never get it back.
Yeah. So it was meant as a teaching tool, and then for some reason, we're all obsessed with it, but they didn't change the rules.
Right.
It's still the same game. But
Still like
you're meant to hate it, but we don't hate it.
Yeah. There's a serious judgment in there somewhere, I think.
Yeah.
All right. Well, here's to Monopoly. National Anthem. 1. Locusts eat Ohio alive. June is the first month in bank robbery season. Silky tornado nestles in the trash. Angles of neckties act as compasses for flight. 2. You will disappear. 3. You will feel the need to disappear. 4. In an abandoned lot, a slow conglomerate of green tongues devour a dead bird. 5. Fill in the blank. This new century sky is A, noctilucent, B, nacreous, C, lenticular, D, unidentifiable as fluoride, E, all of the above. 6. The sky is a cinder block smashed by hydrogen and moth light. 7. Wreckage is a kind of question. It asks you to reconsider your inventory. 8. Broken jackknife, decoder ring, come back. Milk white set of marbles, come back. Boiled shark jaws, sloop load of clams, antique copper brooch, please come back. This wristwatch won't tick, won't heirloom, but disappoint. 9. In its abandoned lot, the dead bird is gone. Green tongues twist slowly. Memory, a thing that devours things that will devour things. 10. Spare licks of lightning pepper the pan handle. Trees teethe in a locust zone. 11. Come back. 12. Construction workers wear federal orange vests, smoke cigarettes in the noon haze as they undo the street ceiling. Cars run on boiled bones. Smog rolls in like a prehistoric ghost to slumber. At night, our cities are swallowed in swamps of orange light. Ghosts, federal as bone, boil around us. 13. According to local sources, a well-kept lawn is the simplest indicator of economic stability. Also, burglars operate under the night's braille blanket. Conversation is a politic of trivia. A newspaper is a politic of a tree. 14. In the beginning, atoms collided like German consonants. Everything else stewed in the oil fields of Los Angeles. 15. And ghosts, federal as bone, boil still around us. 16. Already heat has broke loose of its zoo. Children chew tar, kick cans, call strangers, collect. They drown the radio man in his radio. 17. Come back, children. Come back and see the Midwest checkerboard from 30,000 feet. The smoke of industry leering like syrup over the river, alming the sky of life. I have to say, I'm looking out the window right now, and as Kazim and I are in Southern California, all I can see is smoke. It is kind of a hellscape out there. I don't know. How's it looking over at your place? Oh, you're on mute, man. Oh.
I was saying it's like a little dimmer than it normally is, but
Yeah.
I can't see smoke necessarily.
Yeah, it's like that kind of queasy. They always say that before a tornado, you get that queasy kind of yellow light. That
Yeah, yeah.
like, it's strange times. Even the planet's rebelling against this year. We're
2020 is like pandemic,
yeah,
wildfire, like
yeah,
just so many, the social injustice, like we're
yep,
struggling, resistance movements, like white
yep.
supremacists and machine guns, like the craziness.
All bets are off. Yeah.
It seems like it,
No. Here's to 2021. Let's get a vaccine. Let's.
I mean,
Yeah. I mean, who knows?
don't say, do not say it can't get worse.
Oh, I would never say that. No, no. I've been living through this year. I know well enough that that's not.
Um,
Anytime you say that, it's a jinx.
we're watching this show called Another Life, which is like this sort of kind of addictive yet foolish science fiction show. It's like Star Trek 90210, sort of. But it's worth watching, but it's quite silly.
Yeah.
And anyways, they're looking for alien life. And so last night I had one of those anxiety dreams in which, the whole state of California was on fire. And then I woke up to the news that these alien ships had arrived and used some kind of technology from orbit to funnel up the smoke and extinguish the fires.
That is an incredibly positive dream.
Yeah, well, in the end, it was. Yeah. And they were displacing, the world's governments, and they were like, "We're going to take over and heal your planet." So it was sort of a benevolent tyrant kind of dream. But yeah.
Wow, that sounds like a Huxley story almost. Like Brave New World. That's beautiful.
Yeah, except like in like when the visitors come, they
Right.
claim to be doing that, but then of course actually, if you remember that old show from the 80s, yeah.
The zipper, right? They have the zipper. They would like undo the skin or something.
Well, yeah, they have another skin underneath. So.
These are people, man. Can't trust them. Can't trust them.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's segue from lizards to motels. I'm going to read a poem called "Ghost of Motel 6," and
I do have a request for you before you finish your reading.
Yeah.
You like it if you read Border Song. You don't have to read it now, but
I'd love to. Yeah.
Hear you before you finish.
Absolutely. No, thank you. Yeah, Ghost of Motel 6. And I didn't realize this, but Motel 6 was called Motel 6 originally because rooms cost $6 a night. I do not know why Super 8 is called Super 8, though. That is a mystery that will remain. Google it, as we said earlier. Ghost of Motel 6. If this boy you inhabit is a hotel, its neon needles the alphabet lightly. Bibles loam unopened in the boredom of bedside tables, patient little loaves of leather, black in their theaters of compressed sleep. In each room of each lung, silence swells like a syndicate of ants. A ghost unfurls like a flower from the television. The bathroom window broken, the wind asking questions, asking you to come outside, to see what it has against you. Let's see. Move on. I'm going to read, this poem's called Ghost Story 1848. And there are a number of ghost stories in this book, as you might expect. And this one is based on Phineas Gage. And if you've ever taken a class in introductory psychology, you know about Phineas Gage. He's the famous Gandhi dancer, they would call him. So someone who was working on the rails, who had the misfortune of having a tamping rod, this iron tamping rod that weighed about 13 pounds, blown through his skull by an explosive. And it went down through the bottom here and up through the top. And miraculously, he survived despite having this huge gaping wound in his head. And he made a full recovery, except for the fact that his personality was completely changed as a result. And I think that story is just one of the, it's so rich in terms of its ghosts in that way. The idea of the self, and almost sounds like a David Lynch movie, but who could we become through the simplest of accidents, and what is it to become a ghost to ourselves? So this is Ghost Story 1848. You are a spy in the rain that falls in your head. You've become a different person, and we'll never know why. Will you never know? Will you never know why the weather is a borrowed room in which you record the commands you will not follow? When it grows cold, you chatter like a telegraph. Ghost of NASA. We are aware of the moon. We have been there on television. I saw a cemetery of palm trees, their stumps silvered in plots of pinkish dirt, and the stars, those terrible stars, said nothing. This sky is not spite, nor ill spirit, nor Cain. This sky is forecast, and we are the tower to oversee it. I'd like to dedicate this next one to Kazim, all the way in Normal Heights. Thank you for calling in. I appreciate it. Border song. Night incumbent. The sky looks like a taxidermy of a sky I once knew. The horizon is a red memory of light. Come, newly polished world, and break these hands. I'm going to read one more poem, and this one's probably one of the longest poems in the book. It's called Stetson Retrograde, and it takes its epigraph from a court ruling, Stambovsky versus Ackley, which is actually commonly known as the Ghostbusters ruling. It's where a gentleman bought a house and he was not told by either the realtor or the sellers that the house was considered to be haunted. And so as a result, he took the owners to court and sued so that he could get his money back. And as a result, the law gave ghosts legal standing, which is kind of miraculous and absurd. I mean, and I love the language that came along with that, this idea of the legal and paranormal worlds intersecting themselves. So this is Stetson Retrograde. It's in 6 parts. As a matter of law, the house is haunted. Stambovsky versus Ackley, 1991. 1. If a house is haunted like a radio is haunted, if a body is a radio of blood, if a body of ghosts hums like blood over a valley of bone, if blood is a government of ghosts, if bones grow green as cash in the foreign national of our ghosts, if homes bloom along the interstate of our blood, if from granaries of bone we rise in the newspaper dawn, if amongst the chattering of water we rise like a benediction over the auspices of convenience, if ghosts, we rise like ghosts. If we collect like desire in a desert payphone. If we ring like coins in the cup of Nebraska. I'm sorry, I actually messed that up. If we ring like coins in the cup of night. If we lie like coins in the palm of Nebraska. If the sun is an argument with ghosts, if the sun's argument plays out in squares upon the floor of this home, if the day winds down like a watch, if heaven is a horology, if desire is the body we give the past, if at night termites tick like time in our bones, if in these bones we find the body's foreclosure. 2. If in foreclosure we find the math of our homes, if the math of our homes is the math of fire, if the math of fire is the math of money, if the math of money is a map of interstate rain. If grief is a cup, let me drink from it and be drunk. If drunk and wandering, if thirsty and moneyed, if coined and fashionable, if drunk and wandering like a dog through the supermarkets of the night. If I want the question of a home, if I want as a windmill wants the wind, if I want that lesson, if I want the lesson that breaks me, if I want the desert and its wind, if I want to throw myself to it, if I want never to be seen again, if by the light of dentistry my teeth anoint ledgers lavish with loss, if in these ledgers every tooth is a house, if dead is a tooth the dentist will not pull. 3. If awake, if waking, if awake in the wake of sleep, if sore-eyed and stubbled, if poorly fed yet feed, if coffeeed and quiet, if humming, if awake and humming in the halls of convenience, if aching under the auspice of birds whose voices are feathered and vaulted and keyed, if of our voices we build a bank, will it not speak? If we atone, if we in our homes atone, if we sink alone into the chloroform fiduciary of home, if we pill and drone, if we alone are alone, if we tether ourselves to the stones of our homes, if we sink to lazier bones, if we believe bankruptcy is a throne, if along the rails the whistle no longer blows. 4. If we choose, if we had chosen, if we better, if we had been, if we had been better and awake, if we had accounted, if we had awakened from the tax of sleep to the muted bells of bills that rang like fire in the foundries of past lovers, if lovers and we sleep, if like fire we build the forest for overages, if for a surcharge we survive the past, if of the past we make a ministry of the past. If we pass like fire over the waters of ambition, if upon those waters we find our faces and weep, if weeping stops, if stopping stops, if the ghost math of money stops, if named, if a name is cast like a coin over the auspices of convenience, if I call a name, will that name call back? If I call, will I call collect? If I collect like credit, if I credit the ghost. 5. If named for a ghost, if in the name of all ghosts, if the name is name that calls all ghosts to waking, if waking ghosts, if ghosts rise like desire from the granaries of sleep and dress for the newspaper dawn, if newspapered and awake, if hunted by convenience stores, if alone and named, if nameless and unknown, if anonymous as light, if mute as tax, if a dividend of sun sits like alone upon the floor of this home, if silence is alone, if the sun is a school, if ghosts are a lesson drawn in sand, if the sun looms like a school of blood over subdivisions of ghosts, if subdivided, if the desert like a house of belief is a body dividended with blood. 6. If belief is a ghost, if blood is weather, if bones are birds in a body of fog, if debt is the body in a if debt is a body clothed with birds, if the body is a myth in the municipal pool, if birds gather like fists of cash on federal clotheslines, if ghosts tremble on foreign buildings like cups of fog, if cash is the myth in the myth of collection, if myth is a lesson in collective loss, if we are learned and lean, if we are lessoned by learning, if learning is a lean-to loss, if a ghost is a home, if a ghost is a thing bankrupt of bone, if land is land only, if it is lessened in homes, if we like land grow green with a memory of our blood, if we grow and with land, if we be, if land is, if we be and with land, never let us be without, if never without us, our ghosts.
Wow. That is a really beautiful poem. It's like at the center, it's sort of at the center of the book in a way. Um, and I just think the sound of it and the unfolding of it, it's what's interesting to me is that you give notes at the beginning, at the end of the book, I should say, on some of the poems, and quite fulsome notes kind of explaining, developing the source a little bit.
Yeah.
In a way, they're little counterpoints, the paragraphs of information that is given in the notes, and then the poems themselves, which are so spare.
Right.
But curiously, you don't include anything on this poem. I mean, what you told us in introduction is the most information.
True. Yeah. Yeah. That's a good point.
So I guess the question is maybe what is the relationship between information and the content of the poem itself? Because it seems,
Yeah.
yeah.
No, I think that's a really good question. That was one of the things that I was a little concerned about. I mean, sometimes the information is so interesting that it can overwhelm the poem, and sometimes the poem needs the information to work. In earlier stages of this, I thought about.
That's in this case. I mean, I think that poem is like its own beast and it has its own life.
Thank you.
100%. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think I didn't want to go overboard with the notes. I mean, I love it when there are notes in the back of the book. But I think it can be a very dangerous thing when they'll start to almost overwhelm the content. I wanted there to still be some mystery left, I guess, some kind of hauntings, maybe for
But you made a conscious decision not to include a note on this poem, didn't you? I mean, not even one line, not even to say what you said here.
Yeah, no, very much so. Yeah, I left that out. I mean, because really this was the last poem I wrote for the book. I didn't write this poem until after the book was actually accepted. I felt like the book needed a larger. I know. Yeah. Thank you,
Sarah. Pull it together. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, thank you, Sarah Band, for going out there on a limb with me. I wrote this last summer, and really, I wanted to. As you mentioned, the poems in the book are fairly kind of spare in some ways and epigrammatic, and so I wanted to prove to myself that I could write a longer poem, and B, try to encapsulate all the themes of the book in some ways. And when I read that when I read that quote, that everything kind of came together. And so from there, I started working on it.
Yeah. I mean, first of all, it was a beautiful reading. I'm sorry, I jumped right into the questions. Thank you so much. And I don't necessarily know if there's a mechanism for anybody who's out there in computer land to send you a question or ask you a question, but Amanda's there, maybe she can fill us in. I have a store of questions, but tell us how someone can ask in if they've got something, if they're watching on Facebook.
Yeah, as of now, I think our watchers are lurking ghost-like in the event here. So don't be shy. If anyone has a question, you can just put it in the Facebook comments for us.
Type it in and then Amanda will pop in, because I'm not monitoring that. You're monitoring the Facebook?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, okay. So type that in. But so Adam, I wanted to ask you about this.
Yeah.
It felt to me as I was reading this book, and there was a reason why I wanted you to read Border Song.
Yeah.
I feel like there is an element of craft and attention to formal qualities of the poem in this book that to me feels very subtle and very delicate, and it feels like a product of time. It doesn't feel to me, in my own humble and rude attempts at poetry, to be something that can be faked. Like, it feels like, if I had to guess, I would say, like, you worked on this poem, like these poems, like for years upon years upon years. That may or may not be true. But I want to know what you feel is the relationship between time and writing, literally in your own body.
I think time is inescapable in writing. I think that I truly believe that in every poem there's a ticking clock in the background. I think it's the difference between the white space and the black space, the ink in the page. And I think that there's always this sense in the poem of mortality there on some level. Like, there's this reminder that things are going on. And you are absolutely right, because this book took forever. I was working seriously on it for about 13 years. And so every poem in here was broken down, split in half. I mean, I at some point I began to refer to as quarry work, because it felt like I was basically just doing some heavy lifting. It was like the beginning of, I mean, I hate to bring Rambo into this, but the beginning of Rambo Part 2, where he's breaking rocks in a quarry, And
you said Rambo, and I thought you meant Rambo.
I wish I did. Yeah, that's what I usually hope for. I had to, yeah. Why can I keep I had to keep it up here. I had to bring it down.
Poetry, like poetry Rambo.
Yes. The poetry of Sylvester Stallone has really been underrated in our society.
Underrated.
Yeah. I mean, really, those biceps and,
Rambo, like his adventures in Africa and everything, and like guns and stuff, like he sort of was trying to channel the action here.
Yeah.
But I mean a line like this when we go to page 26, the last section of the Mosquito Monocracy, where you do the little stanza, upon alkaline lakes we skate on alkaline skates. In ermine the eel eats the eggs of each oak tree. I the exit out into the taxi infested night. I mean, that's like music. That's actual music. We often talk about music and poetry, and it's a metaphor.
Right.
The phrase is a metaphor for diction, vocabulary, or prosody. But in this case, the sound work is actually music. Do you have a background in music or composing?
I don't know. I'm desperately jealous of anyone who has a musical ability. I think that I've.
You have a musical ability.
Well, no, thank you. I think an instrument. I took violin as a kid. I taught myself guitar very poorly. My brother's a fantastic guitar player, but I'm not very skilled. My mother has picked up banjo in retirement, which is pretty amazing. So that's, I aspire to be musical. I think I love music. And I think that, I mean, not to go too far back, but when I was in utero, my mother would read poems to me. That was what she did. And I did that for my daughters too. And I think, I believe firmly that we're raised with music. We have the heartbeat of our mothers, and we have the sounds of their internal organs, and then we have our own heartbeat as this drum, and we have the nursery rhymes that have that music. And so I think that one of the great privileges of poetry is that you can you can re-engage with that sense of music and language that common speech strips it of for the sake of convenience.
For sure. In this same poem that I just quoted from, the Mosquito Monocracy,
Yeah.
this is the opening stanza. Josephine, I've junked a jazz band, some squall, grollo by the cobweb's logic, all skulls and bouillabaisse, but we'll see come Zulu time if it's of goodwill or gall the Zoroaster sings. All this in the hallway where July stalls, jet-lagged, in the hallway where the lemonade light lingers. I mean, that's like who it reminds me mostly of, and I want to ask you about your sources in a second, because this reminds me a lot of Harriet Mullen's riffing in Muse and Drudge, where she's really trying to kind of create jazz in a vocal pattern.
Yeah.
So who are your sources? Like, who are the poets that are important to you that you feel like you draw from? You have quite a panoply of writers who blurbed the book at the end, from various nations of poetry land, right? Timothy Donnelly, Ray Armentrout, Ilya Kaminsky, Jericho Brown, Eduardo Corral, all writers who have really, really different type of approaches to the lyrics. Although I think they share a concern for beauty of language.
Right.
Yeah.
I think, no, thank you. I mean, I adore Harriet Mullen. I think her work is without compare. And I think I've probably been more influenced by it in recent poems that I've been writing too. I think in addition to her, Nathaniel Mackey is someone who I read a lot in terms of, I love his kind of, his new epic form in that way with the Amdamdulu.
So you do feel influenced by a jazz aesthetic?
I do, yeah. I think I like that. I like that kind of verve. I like that playfulness in the language. You know, but as well, I mean, I don't know if you would call, you know, Jared Manley Hopkins a jazz man, but I think, you know, he was insane. I mean, his language was incredible, and I remember being so struck by that. You know, when I encountered him as an undergraduate. Both him and T.S. Eliot back in the day, you know, and I think Plath was someone who spoke to me in terms of just the really kind of violent yet beautiful procession of words that she would deal with, and then you know, Berryman at times where he could throw in these little kind of bon mots, like there's that moment, I think we best go to bed now, or that line from, what is it, Dream Song 4, where he says, I might as well be on Mars. Like, he just has these little kind of like phrases that he throws in there from time to time.
Christine Madsen had asked about which poets and novelists inspire you, so you just covered that. We do have a question also from Julia Fishkind. She is taking a narrative creative writing class in college. And was wondering what advice you have for a first-time poet. I think you both teach poetry to people who are venturing into that realm for the first time in their lives, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So what advice for these first-time poets?
Oh, what do you think, Kazim?
I mean, I'd say first and foremost, you're never not a first-time poet, because every time you approach the page, every time you approach a poem, every time you try to open your perception, it is new. And I think that you can learn technique, you can practice the very act of perception, you can practice prosody and form in poetry, but the true engagement with a new poem it's always the first poem. So I feel like I am forever grateful to never have learned a thing, in a sense, to always be new, I think. And that's hard one, and it doesn't come without cost, certainly. But that's where I start. That's not very practical. I could give you some practical advice too, but I want to hear from Adam.
No, I think that's.
I will give you some practical advice, but first, let's hear from Adam.
No, I love what you're saying about the, you know, every poem is the first time you're encountering that poem. I think that, you know, when I sit down, well, I don't sit down, I actually stand at a desk, but when I'm standing at my desk and trying to write, I want to be surprised by what I'm doing. I don't want to feel like I'm treading old ground. I want to feel like in I'm in danger of really screwing things up, which means I'm probably doing something that might be interesting. You want to be surprising yourself. I think in terms of practical advice, I think it's just, you know, reading as much as you possibly can. That seems, you know, like so banal, but it's true. And I think carving out that time to write. I mean, this is a world that does everything possible to distract you from doing the things that will make you feel like a complete and human being. And I think writing is a wonderful way of getting in touch with that. So, you know, they used to say kill your television, right? But I guess you can't really kill the internet anymore. It's the ultimate zombie, which I think, because we're here right now. So thank you, internet. I don't know, what do you think, Kev?
I think that's great advice. The second part of what you said is tremendously important, because I think we do make time for, we live in a society that's monetized, and the spiritual side of our life, the psychic well-being, the paranormal, none of that's important unless a dollar sign can be put on it. And so it's very, very difficult to be mad, to be crazy, to just say like, I make things, you know. Even poetry to an extent is like creepingly being monetized, or even not necessarily even dollar, but like credited with like some sense of value, as opposed to stripping away a value of doing something completely. Like, do you sit and do mazes, or is crossword puzzles, or like some thing that gives you joy and pleasure but is otherwise completely pointless? I don't mean engaging in an activity that's passive, like watching a show or doing Sudoku or something like that. I mean making something, actually making something, drawing, or, you know, we allow our children leave to do these things. Of course, that's like a thing that, you know, we all know, that children are allowed to draw and make dances and put on shows. But the society itself doesn't value that. So there's a long way of saying, like, making time for your work as a writer, like to say that, you know, for me, spending half an hour every day or whatever you have to write, to make a poem, this is like as important. We make time, we find time for things. We do. We find time to brush our teeth every day. Maybe not in quarantine. I do, because I'm obsessed with oral hygiene. But we find time. We do. We find time to visit the bathroom, to do our functions. We make time in our day for the things that are important. We do. We make time for things. So we can make time for writing as well. We don't, because the value system is not there. So I think that's important, to find that value system. And then the other thing that I'll say very, very quickly is, like, to be a writer is to be a reader and to participate, and to be a listener, to listen to poetry, to read poetry, to be engaged with the art. I think that's an important part of being a writer too.
Absolutely.
We have a really cool question from Sora Hagginson. Hi, and thank you for reading. Mr. Davis, I was wondering if you have used other mythical creatures in your poems. I'm reminded of the Ghost Poet Project.
This is where the ghosts of my students are coming back to haunt me here. It's good to hear from you, sir. I hope you're well wherever you are. I know you should be at college right now, but hopefully you're on your way there at some point. And I hope your rock climbing is going well. Sora is a Olympic rock climber. I don't know if you guys know. It's incredibly impressive, the kind of people I deal with.
No, wait, it's actually in the Olympics now, climbing rocks?
I think so, yeah. I mean, she's on par for, I mean, it was, and she was also the champion in our advisory's arm wrestling competition. So she, and a wonderful poet in her own right. She was a really, really good writer. And not was, she still is. She's gonna overtake us all here soon. I am very poorly schooled in mythology, which is an unfortunate thing. Although strangely, this book began, when I first started writing this book, it had a figure in it called Mr. M, who was a minotaur or a minotaur. I'm not pronouncing it correctly. And he was eventually expunged from the manuscript. But this manuscript actually started in some kind of a Greek mythology. I wish I had a better understanding of mythology. I find as I get older, I'm having to revisit the classics that I shirked when I was younger in favor of reading Spider-Man comics and things like that. So.
It was a different kind of mythology. That's
true. Yeah. It's our contemporary American mythology now in terms of our corporate mythology. Actually, you could probably say that's what we're, the comic book movies at least. So. Yep.
I guess we're nearing the end, which makes me really sad, but I thank you both. This felt really perfect for this queasy Blade Runner hellscape kind of day. So I do want to ask Adam about your poetry hotline.
Oh yeah.
Can you talk about it briefly for those who may be experiencing a poetry emergency?
Yeah. I mean, if you're having a poetry emergency, just dial 619-329-5757, and you will find on the other end a variety of different poems, a variety of ghost stories, some dead ends, a place where you can leave messages. You can think of it as your kind of home away from home from Zoom. I wanted to create something that tied into the analog or the focus in the book, that the analog technologies that I explore in the book. And as a kid, I loved those hotlines where you just call in and you didn't quite know what you were getting into. But if you find yourself stranded on the side of the road, it's not toll free, which I apologize for, but I just can't afford that. But if you have 35 cents, 45 cents, if there's even a payphone out there anymore, everyone has a cell phone anyway, it's fine. But yeah, if you want to call that, there's lots of fun things to enjoy with that. And when you can't read, listen to the phone.
And one more question for both of you. Can you just tell our viewers the best ways to follow you both in virtual space, what your preferred social media conduits are and your handles?
I'm on Twitter as Kazim Ali Poet. And that is the easiest way to find me, get in touch with me, follow me. Yeah.
I am on Twitter and on Instagram at cubist_octopus. But I'm sure you can just find it if you Google my name. And Instagram is probably, I don't know, I'm a little better at that, although Kazim takes better pictures on there of himself and me. So you can find us there. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much to both of you. And to our viewers, you will find links to buy both awesome books on this event. You can watch this event again on Warwick's Facebook Live and soon also YouTube. Right. And thank you so much to both of you. True pleasure. I could absolutely listen for a couple more hours.
Well, thank you to Warwick's too.
Yes,
thank you.
And for everyone out there, please, buy a copy, not just of my book or Kazim's, but just go and buy copies. Please support your local bookstores. We live in an age of ignorance, and they are a vaccine for that. So please support them. And thank you to Warwick's for making this happen. Thank you, Amanda. What a lovely, and thank you, Kazim. I'm so delighted to be here with you guys. This was wonderful. Thank you. I really appreciate it.
And if you order Adam's book from Warwick's, you get a sticker.
Who doesn't like stickers, man?
All right. Bye, Facebook world.
Thank you so much.
Everybody. Thank you.
Take you guys off live. There we are.
Thank you. Thanks so much for